Hello, everyone. My name is Samir. I'm the Senior Director for Security Consulting at Sparent Technologies. As I also have my colleague with me, Tej Aulakh, Managing Consultant. By profession, I am a security research penetration tester, and that sort of tells what's the topic for my presentation is. So today we are going to talk about, is your cryptocurrency exchange secure? So for today's agenda, we'll talk about the use cases of blockchain. We are going to talk about some of the security challenges that we are facing currently, and what are some of these solutions that we have to actually better protect us. So let's get started. So as we all know, the use cases for blockchain are sort of very widespread. Anything from financial services, you have smart contracts, you have healthcare, it's being utilized widely for patient records, and then you have automotive companies that are trying this technology both in car sharing, mobility, as well as also for keeping the inventory track. But one of the far most utilized or used use case for a crypto blockchain is cryptocurrency. But the thing is that really secure? Well, unfortunately not, right? I mean, there are over 2 billion or plus value that has been lost in most recent attacks that have happened on the blockchain platforms. So that got me into thinking, is like, what are some of the basic, as a security researcher, right, you're always sort of thinking, okay, if this attack happened, let me try and decipher it. What is really causing these attacks? So that got me into thinking. I went onto Google, started doing some research, and came across a really good blog that sort of laid it down very nicely. These are the top 5 things, and you're going to take a look at that. So the number 1 was the actual hot wallet protection. This is your digital cash that's being stored at a crypto exchange. Second is the transaction malleability. We know that blockchain is sort of immutable, but before a transaction is recorded, it needs a signature, and it gets issued a transaction ID. What we found through the second attack was that before it gets signed, you can actually manipulate it, and then that issues it a different transaction ID, which can then be routed to an attacker for him to actually claim that all that money. Third one is the code level vulnerabilities. So these are the malicious code, either intendedly coded into the smart contract, or someone got onto the network and was able to actually make the change into the smart contract code itself. The last 2 I would say, are the most common type of attack that we see day in and day out. And those are happening both on users. So you're all getting phishing emails. You're all getting transferred to sites which are actually trying to lure you into clicking a link. And then through that, you're getting malwares, keyloggers, et cetera, being downloaded onto your system, and then from there, they are trying to see how they can get to your private keys, et cetera. Similarly, attackers are going after doing targeting phishing attacks and campaigns against the employees of these crypto exchanges. Because once they get hold of your domain credential as an employee, then they can actually laterally move into an organization until they have the whole farm, which makes their job very easy, because then there is really no defense. They can keep attacking you and keep wiping their traces until they finally get caught, and then they move on to new targets. So recently, when the CoinCheck attack happened, I was, fortunately or unfortunately, was actually in Japan. And I happened to talk to various different cryptocurrency exchanges. And I was very surprised to find out that most of us are not even doing basic security hygiene. What I mean by the basic security hygiene, Like when you have an enterprise, the first thing that you do, email security. You do perform network penetration tests on your infrastructure almost on an yearly basis or every time you make a major change. If you have web applications through which you are doing transactions, either financial transactions, e-commerce transactions, or even like credit card data type of transactions, you're making sure that that platform or that application is being penetration tested, all the vulnerabilities that are on it are being remediated, and it's deemed secure. And we do that on a regular basis. And then last but not least, if you have an application for which you developed a source code, or you have picked up an open source code from somewhere, you are doing a source code analysis on it to find if there are any security vulnerabilities in it, if there are any misintended coding that has been done on it, are there backdoors in the code which could be later on utilized by a hacker to get back into the application. So these are three basic things: apps, network, and source code, which I found through talking to all these crypto exchanges that they are not happening, they are not testing for those on a regular basis. So again, the three things that one can do to actually become a harder target to crack, and this is for someone who's on a budget. So I asked them, like, why did you not really look into these things? These are basic things. So the answer that I got from it is, oh, we thought it takes a lot of effort and it also costs a lot. No, it doesn't. And that's why I sort of thought of putting this slide up, because you can do these three basic things. Check your network, external, internal, check your applications, and if you have writing smart codes, smart contracts, then make sure that the source code for those goes through a regular audit. Again, this is not the key to the kingdom. There's nothing that's called absolute security, but it actually makes you a harder target to crack. And that should be the objective. Because if they're coming after between you and your other company that has done this, you are an easier target to crack. Just like us, entrepreneurs, hackers also looks at ROI, return on investment. What's easier for me to crack into? And so these three things will make you a tougher target to crack. With next one, actually, I will invite Tej to the stage and talk about what are some of the things that you can do on a more comprehensive scale to become even more tougher target to crack. Over to you, Tej.
All right, thank you, Samir. Security is not easy, so that's why we're tagging him here. So hopefully everybody can hear me back there. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about is what Samir already touched on it. I run the source code analysis, security architecture review, and team at Spire. So we work with a number of exchanges and your peers in the blockchain space to secure the applications they're building on a daily basis. So obviously, what I'm going to touch on is basically these are the steps you should take in order to secure your applications, your infrastructure, and obviously the physical environment around where your offices and everything else around it. So from a security assessment perspective, these are the number of things that you should do as a blockchain or any traditional. These are a lot of the things we do in traditional space as well. These are some of the additional things you should do for blockchain in terms of. So the number one is obviously security policy and risk assessment. So these are your policies. This is, are you using two-factor authentication? This is your social media policy around it. How your employees are accessing their remote network and how they're accessing VPNs. This is end-to-end in terms of the physical access. Who has access to your building? How do they get in? What are the things that they can take with them? This is your complete risk assessment and what are the kind of the key factors around that risk is, and what are the impact is if anything that is breached. The second is obviously, this is, in terms of architecture design review, it starts with the threat modeling exercise. So threat modeling, this is you're looking at your internal threats, external threats, whether that's application, that's your infrastructure, that's people. This is looking at complete threat analysis of anything they're building around it. So the number of your peers that we're working with in the crypto exchange, currency or exchanges, this is something that they lack, because it's there's a rush to get you want to be the first one out there. So the architecture reviews and design reviews are not there. So you start basically, there's 4 people get together and start coding, and then it's kind of working backwards. So when we go on site, we're basically, the first thing we do is look at from a threat analysis perspective. The next is, like Samir mentioned, is a source code review. This is static analysis. This is looking at a manual source code review. This is identifying what type of smart contracts are you guys using. Is it for legal purposes? Is it for business process purposes? What are the dependencies on it? What are the different APIs are being used? A lot of cases, the applications are built using open source technologies. So what are the dependencies? How updated? What are the different security holes are on those different technologies being used on in terms of open source technologies? This is again, manual code review is used for identifying any high-risk modules in the code. Those needs to be done, and a manual, a review of whether that's internally or externally, that needs to be reviewed manually. Obviously, from any crypto exchange perspective, cryptographic review is very critical and important. This is identifying how your keys are stored, who has access to it. Is there a hard wallet? What's the, who has access? How people are interacting with the hard wallets, and the cold storage in terms of what are the cold wallets, and how are people accessing it? Can they take offside? And can someone hack into any of the cold storage for your cryptographic keys? Next. This is kind of somewhat more traditional application security, and like Samir touched on it, this is looking at it from your web application, whether you're actually doing an ICO, or you have a members, or you're doing you have a full-blown application in a fintech space. In looking at your injections, whether it's a SQL injection, cross-site scripting, anything malicious someone can do externally in the HTTP space. Database audit is the next, and that's very critical in terms of any transaction in the blockchain space is being stored somewhere. Some database storage is being handled, and this is critical review of is who has access to the some of the database tables. Can they query it? Can who's an admin, and what kind of information an admin has? This is kind of complete review of the structure in terms of encryption on some of the critical data that's stored at the database level. Number one threat in any blockchain space that we've seen is insider threat. And so this is very critical in terms of reviewing all the different aspects when it comes to where information is stored. IDS and IPS, this is your traditional in terms of looking at your firewalls, all communication going in and out, and this, obviously this is, critical in that space. This is some of the few other things that I should be looking. One of the key things that we've seen, and we have actually done it ourselves, is basically training the end users, your employees, training them, from a security perspective, in terms of business process perspective, in terms of privacy perspective, and also some of the some of the rules in terms of what information they can share internally and externally, whether that's either social media or email or any of those information. So it's a complete end-to-end training that is very critical in terms of that. Red team, next is that red team activity. That's more of a, you're looking at holistically in terms of your infrastructure, your physical environment, your application, and doing a complete testing once everything is built and it's in place, and it's simulating as something the hacker would do. That's more of a red teaming exercise. And last but not least is a DR exercise, having a business continuity plan in place and making sure you can execute that business continuity plan. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Samir to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tej. So next slide is more of a marketing slide. I just want to let you guys know that you're not really in it alone. I mean, security can be a cumbersome exercise, and Sparent can actually provide a lending hand. We have a variety of services, anything from web applications, networks, as well as source code analysis, crypto analysis, services that we can provide to help you become a more tougher target to crack. So thank you for your time, and if you have to reach us, you can reach us at securitylabs@sparent.com. Thanks.